Public Works Department will be in the spotlight this month on the May City Matters segment. We'll have one first-time Grand Island Television studio guest, and another city employee will be joining us one last time before he retires. First on the slate is newly appointed Public Works Director John Collins. We will spend some time with him today discussing some of the short-term and long-term projects that he will be leading for the city. Later on in the show, we'll have one final interview with Gary Mader before he heads off to retirement after 36 years here with the City of Grand Island. He will educate us on the wastewater treatment plant capital improvement plan and why it is so important to our community. All that and more on today's show. Well, John, I wanted to give you a big GITV welcome to the studio. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Were you excited to get to come down here and join us today, or a little bit nervous?
I guess a little both.
Well, we're excited to have you here, and we're going to have a lot of great information to share with our citizens. So I guess the first question I had for you was, I just wanted to get to know you a little bit better and find out some information about your career background and about yourself.
Sure.
So tell me all about you, John.
About me? Well, I started my career putting up buildings, went on doing utilities and permits for 20 years or so. From there, I took over maintenance for the Department of Transportation, and from there, traffic for a while. And then, of course, during that time, I served on a number of AASHTO committees, including maintenance management systems and pavement preservation, stuff of that nature, and a number of research projects with the National Transportation Research Board, national academies, everything from chip seals to fiber optics and such as that.
So it sounds like you've had a lot of experience in this sort of area. Is that right?
All over the place, yeah.
Yeah, and were most of your positions out of state, or where were they at when you were talking about all your careers?
Oh, so far most of it's been in Louisiana, although
Okay.
I had a few short stints here and there.
Okay. What are maybe some of the most beneficial things that you have learned from those careers that you're going to bring here to the city? Well, you just talked about some of the projects that you worked on and things like that.
Well, some of the things I'm going to try to bring to the city is a pavement management program,
Okay.
so that we can extend the life of the pavement. In other words, we'll take longer between overlaying a section of road, which should diminish our cost as well as the inconvenience to the public while we're doing projects out there.
Yeah, I know that was one of the items that I had down that I wanted to discuss. That sounds like an interesting project. Well, the other question I had, I was just wondering now, you were working for the state before in your job mostly, is that right?
Mostly.
And now you're working for city government. Has there been a transition there, or has that been a challenge for you?
There's really very little difference between state and local government, and even between states there's different people, but the rules are very similar, the objectives are very similar, and let's face it, a road is a road.
So you think, for the most part, a lot of similarities, it sounds like.
It's hard to tell the difference.
Okay. What have you thought about attending city council meetings? How was that?
They've been interesting, a little more calm than some of the legislative sessions I've attended, but for the most part quite interesting, lots of nice people.
Now, when you visited Grand Island for the first time and you were being interviewed here at the City of Grand Island, what were your thoughts maybe about our community or about the divisions that they took you out to that you're leading right now?
Well, I like the area a lot as I passed through it. As far as taking me out, all we did was ride by the front door of most areas. So other than seeing the surface of the streets and maybe some poles sticking up out of the ground, that's about it.
So is Grand Island a lot smaller community than you're used to, or?
It is. Of course, Baton Rouge is about twice the size of what I was used to because of the Katrina incident and all the people moving up to Baton Rouge from New Orleans. But
so you worked on that. That's a quite significant that you were involved in a project there. What was your involvement with the hurricanes?
Well, during the hurricanes, I was over maintenance at that time, where our staff did things in support of the event as well as post-event, directing traffic, getting the contraflow where all lanes of the interstate flow in the same direction so that you can evacuate more people faster. Post-hurricane, we did a lot of cleanup, removing debris and so forth, locating the owners of the 1,000 or so boats that were hanging from our structure since the water level had fallen so much.
Wow.
And then when I moved over to traffic, I actually started the cleanup of the installing the signals across all the intersections. Most of the population, and therefore most of the signals, was in South Louisiana, which is also where Katrina washed away all the infrastructure. So we had to rebuild a couple thousand intersections at that time.
So it sounds like we have lots of experience from you to build on here in our community.
Well, I hope we have fewer hurricanes.
Yeah, we won't have hurricanes. We might have some tornadoes or bad weather, but it sounds like you've been working hard at your other jobs. Well, you've been here a couple months now, and so I wanted you to talk about maybe some immediate projects or goals that you see for the Public Works Department and discuss those a little bit.
Sure. Well, I'd like to start, or I've already started clearing out a lot of the old projects. I'm hoping to get the signal at Webb and Front installed in July sometime.
Okay.
Hoping to get the screw pump at the treatment plant repaired so we can keep treating water.
Are those both kind of projects that's been working on, or just new things that have came up lately?
The signal, like a lot of projects, has been on the books for several years. I think it goes back to around 2008. The screw pump is new. It broke just before I started, the week before I came, in anticipation of my arrival, and both of which are very important. And there's a number of other projects out there as well.
So you've got your to-do list, it sounds like, ready to go.
We have a very long to-do list, and it's growing.
Now, as you're talking about some of these short-term projects, I'm sure your division is looking years ahead too. You have your 1- and 5-year plans and things like that. What are some of your long-range maybe goals or areas of improvement that you're going to be working on?
We'll have several areas. One goal, which is a shorter term, is I'm initiating a way to track issues that are reported by the public from the time they're reported until we complete a response, whether it's flooding or a pothole or whatever, something that we can take care of. And one of the other things I'm doing, as I mentioned earlier, is building a pavement maintenance system.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that, because we always get a lot of calls, I know, in public information about potholes or streets being closed for maintenance and stuff. What's that plan going to be about, John?
Well, right now it has two pieces. One, we need to improve the mix of asphalt.
Okay.
Grand Island's been using a standard that's 20 to 30 years old. There's some new mixes out there that will last longer and that are actually cheaper. We should save about 20% on material costs by changing mixes, as well as extend the life. We have some roads that are being overlaid every 3 years. It should extend that to somewhere between 8 and 12 years.
Those are the roads that have lots of traffic on them, or why are they done so often?
Primarily, the heavier the traffic and the greater the volume, the more frequently you overlay it.
Okay.
And there are some other things. You mentioned some of the roads are failing simply because the base, the dirt underneath, is bad. And that will never be solved by simply overlaying it. We will eventually have to take the road up, put some type of mat material down to hold the pavement against the soil, and then rebuild the road. Those will be more expensive and longer term. On the other hand, a repair like that will last around 20 years.
Okay, so you don't always just cover up or work on the top layer of the road, it doesn't sound like.
Well, those will be the exceptional cases
Okay.
for when there's a problem other than something wrong with the surface. And for the surface, we're going to institute a number of treatments. In addition to the thin overlay that's been used in Grand Island for a long time, we're going to do what's called some reseal projects.
Okay, what's that mean, John?
Basically, you take a very, very thin layer of asphalt, in this case probably asphalt and sand, or it may be asphalt and rock, and put across the top. It will fill in all of the holes and keep the surface from breaking up. The surface breaks up whenever you have moisture get into the small cracks, and either it's in its water form, a vehicle will pass over it, causing water pump. As it hits the water, it'll get 2,400 or so psi and break the pavement out to the side. The same thing occurs when it freezes. The ice freezes and expands and causes the same problem. by filling the holes with a light treatment, you prevent that from happening, and therefore you never have the pothole form and you never have to do a full overlay. And there's a factor of 8 between the cost of a light treatment versus the cost of an overlay.
Okay, so are these treatments that you're talking about, are they being used nationwide, or are they just being used in a few places right now? Or
these are nationwide.
Okay.
The exact way you do it is specific to each region.
Okay.
The general method is nationwide, but you have to test it a little bit locally, so we'll have a few test sections to see exactly what mix of sand and rock and asphalt will work together to give us the best result.
So you think something like this could improve some of our streets and maybe be a little more cost effective? Is that what you're hoping? Or?
Sure, we should reduce costs quite a bit and free up our staff to work on other things such as more street sweeping or addressing the larger problems when we free up funding where we can rebuild a road whenever there's a base failure.
So is that something that you think you're going to start implementing pretty soon, or is that going to be a few years down the road? Or
we've already rewritten the specifications for the new asphalt.
Okay.
The contractors will start seeing a difference within a few months. The general public probably won't notice for about 3 years. That's when it should start impacting our budget. So towards the end of this summer, we hope to have the new asphalt going down. So 2015 or so, we should see a difference in our budget.
And will our street employees, will they have to do some training on how to use these new treatments, or will it be similar to?
There will be training. Anytime
Okay.
there's a change, there's training. Not only our staff, but the local contractors and vendors that supply us materials will also have a small learning curve.
Okay. I had a question for you too, John. I know you've only been here for a few months, but just in your time here at the City of Grand Island, as you've been working with your different divisions, and you have several of them in the Public Works Department, are there any areas that you think are maybe some strength areas, or maybe some areas where you know you're going to have some challenges ahead?
One of the main challenges is the wastewater plant. Much of the facility has been used to the point of failure. It was put in 1964, and just like a piece of your car, if it was from almost 50 years ago, it wouldn't work so well. Much of the sewer treatment plant is very old and has been used well beyond its design life and needs to be replaced. We're expecting to initiate a $45 million program to bring the plant and the collection system back up to functioning just to maintain the current level of service.
And I know that kind of leads us into our next interview with Gary Mader. We're going to discuss that a little bit more, but I know you also have been working or starting to work on a contingency plan. Is that right, for the wastewater treatment plant?
Well, for the interceptor lines
Okay.
that go across the city.
Okay. And why are you starting that plan, or how does that work, John?
Well, the consultant study, I think it was submitted about a year ago, indicated that most of the pipe was a grade F, meaning that it's in theoretical failure and in danger of a collapse. Most of the time, if a piece of the pipe breaks, it won't be a problem. You just pump from manhole to manhole and you keep going. But there's a few pieces, such as just north of the crossing at the railroad for the northeast interceptor. If that point collapses, it's around a 3-mile run to get you back to the nearest place where you can pump back to the treatment plant. And going 3 miles with pipe has a number of challenges. Number one, you cannot lay it across the surface of a railroad. You have to go underneath somehow, so you have to find a path there. Where possible, you don't want to block any local streets, although there will be some blocked if this happens for several days. And then there's the design of the pumps in order to get enough pressure to pump all the way back, as well as finding enough pipe. To go 3 miles to get around all this, we have to locate a number of vendors that we can get pipe very quickly. One question that came up is why you can't keep it on hand. If you keep pipe on hand above the ground, it deteriorates to the point it's no longer usable. So you only have a few months you can keep it before it starts cracking up and becomes useless.
So on the plan, you're going to have to figure out where you could go to get the pipe if we would need it. Is that right?
Correct. And all this has already been done. The plan's
Okay.
finished,
Okay,
and we're
great.
ready if something happens. And we have a few low-cost projects that we're working on to shorten the length of run from 3 miles down to less than a mile.
So it's a plan that you have in place But you hope you never have to use it, huh?
Right, we completed it a week ago,
Okay.
and we shouldn't have to use it. The odds are low, but we're ready just in case.
Well, John, I have enjoyed having you in our studio today, and I'm sure you'll be back several times because your division always has tons going on in the city, and there are always projects that our citizens are always interested in getting updates on. So great job today, and we're glad to have you and look forward to having you again, John.
Okay, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Our next guest is Gary Mader, who has served as Utilities Director since 1986. In the recent past months, though, he was also named as the Interim Public Works Director while the hiring process for that position was being completed. During that time, Gary led the efforts of the Wastewater Treatment Plant Capital Improvement Plan, and that's what our topic of the interview will be today. Well, Gary, I always like having you in the studio, but I'm feeling a little sad today because I know this is going to be our last time that we have you as a guest on our City Matters segment.
Well, thank you, Wendy.
It's been great having you, working with you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
But I wanted to make sure this was a memorable interview, so we're going to talk about the wastewater treatment plant. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Well, my first question for you is, how was serving as the Public Works Director during that interim time?
Well, the Public Works Department is a large department. Has responsibility for some major infrastructure across the city, and of course the first weekend was a snowstorm, which the street department handled that very well.
We had some snowstorms in there for you.
It went very well, though. Most of the processes and schedules and plans were in place, and it went very well. And while I got some credit for it, the bottom line was the street department handled that issue very well.
Well, I know you have a big division that you lead, and then taking that on was probably a little bit of a challenge at times, but you did a good job. Well, in April, there was a study session presented to City Council talking about the Wastewater Treatment Capital Improvement Plan and a cost service-based rate study. So the first part I wanted to visit with you about, Gary, was just let's talk about the improvement plan and some highlights that were presented that night. Can you share with us?
Well, the presentation to Council was based on some serious changes, major changes we'd seen in the scope of what the city needed to do since the last report to Council back in 2009. And in 2009, the loading of solids and biological oxygen demand, those are measurements of strength of wastewater effluent, were very high to the city's wastewater treatment plant, even to the point of overwhelming it. So we had some violations of our discharge permits and that sort of thing. And as a result of that, the city was basically trying to move very quickly to accommodate that high solids loading and biological oxygen demand, and had programmed some major plant improvements to accommodate that. But to JBS's credit, which was the source of most of that high solids and biological oxygen demand, they undertook a project on their own on their site to greatly reduce that loading. So since 2009, the approach that the city had anticipated then, it has changed greatly. And as a result of that, it was time to update the Council as to the status of where things were.
There was lots of details that night that were presented.
There were. And the other major issue that's occurred since 2009 is the completion of a comprehensive study of the city's collection system. Okay. And the city's collection system is in dire need of some major repair. That kind of comprehensive study had not been done for an extended period of time, but once it revealed itself, it was important to get the Council and craft a plan of action to accomplish the repairs that need to be done before we have serious failures.
So what is involved in maybe some of those improvement plans, or the cost associated with those repairs and maintenance items?
Well, again, in 2009, the problem being addressed was the high solids and biological oxygen demand, and there was a program initiated to put in place the construction of major equipment to the tune of about $20 million worth of equipment at the wastewater treatment plant to handle it. With the change in the JVS effluent discharge being evidenced over the last couple of years, that part of the project could be canceled.
Okay,
so the city didn't need to make that investment. But on the other side of it, the other issue that came up then were the extensive problems with the collection system. So the focus of the capital improvement plan over the next 5 years was changed drastically.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
The major equipment additions that were planned in 2009 have all been canceled, and now moving on to address the issues that we have today.
So it sounds like there's some significant changes just in the last couple of years of the
There have
direction we're
been.
moving.
And again, that was the point of getting back to council, so the council would be advised as to what the issues were now and what had changed in that last 2-year period.
So in the upcoming years, Gary, will we just be working on repairing our whole system and trying to maintain it? Is there going to be certain areas that it's going to be worked on, or how's that going to work?
Well, there are major collector lines. We
Okay.
call them interceptors. That's
Okay, interceptors.
that's a large diameter line. It can be anywhere from 20, 30, 40-inch diameter lines. And those large lines traverse the city, and then the smaller lines that run up and down the alleys to collect waste from folks' homes dump into those large lines, and by the large lines, then that waste is transferred to the wastewater treatment plant. But we've seen some serious damage in the northeast interceptor particularly. That's
Okay.
a line that runs north across the city and serves as far west as the Capitol Heights area.
So it's a big area.
That
town,
needs some
huh?
major improvements. We've seen concrete sloughing off of the walls of that pipe due to the corrosive atmosphere created by the waste stream. And so there's some major repairs there. There are 2 other major interceptors, one to the west and one to the south. They too need some work, although they're not in quite as rough a condition as that northeast interceptor.
So those will be some areas that are immediate concern?
They will be.
Mm-hmm.
That is immediate concern to make sure those interceptors work, because if the interceptors fail, then you have major areas of the city that are no longer have the wastewater treatment plant or the drainage system available to them.
Now this capital improvement plan, Gary, that's going to take place over several years, is that correct? Or
Yeah, the capital improvement program, the initial to address the immediately critical issues will be done hopefully the next 4 to 5 years.
Okay. But even that,
So that's
still
the first
4 or
issue.
5 years it takes.
It does. It takes time to get the designs accomplished and get the work done, get specifications prepared, bids solicited. You know, there's a number of processes that need to be go through. And truthfully, the basic designs are known, the problems are identified, but there will be a good deal of engineering work yet required in order to get the final design and to craft the details of a specification so that bids can be received.
And make sure that our system keeps working right. It's probably going
Yes,
to take some
correct.
engineering. What are going to be the costs associated with those plans for the next 4 or 5 years? Do we have an idea?
It's anticipated that project, the total scope of work required will probably be in the neighborhood of $40 to $44 million.
Yeah, so it's a significant amount of money to be able to get the plan moving, isn't it?
It is.
Well, it's also part of the presentation that night. They talked about recovering the costs to provide this service and possible rate increases. And I think we're at the point now where there's going to have to continue to be a rate increase in order to do a big project like that. Is that correct? Or what was the feelings that night about that?
2 years ago in 2009, when the presentation was initially made, again dealing with a completely different set of circumstances, a schedule of rate increases was established at that time in order to facilitate the major expansions that were needed at that time. And so that even the work has been shifted, but even though major projects at the wastewater treatment plant are now canceled, the collector system work will more than make the difference between the two. So it's a matter of having to continue those rate increases in order to ensure we have a sound system.
And this is something that I know nobody likes to have rate increases out there, but it's a project that really we're at a point that we don't have a choice. We need to get moving with it. Is that your thoughts, Gary?
Yes, there are major projects that just need to be done. We talked about the collector system. There are some issues with the headworks in the plant itself. And another facet of that rate study was also to accommodate JBS's improvements on site. The wastewater system rate structure is such that if a business or an individual even has a very high strength waste, that there are particular additional charges associated with the treatment of those. And so with the JBS modifications on their site, that revenue stream from JBS will be reduced, at least initially.
So the city will be getting less funds?
The city will be getting less funds, but the city's expenditures for treatment will likely go down some, but the major capital improvements still need to be financed.
Okay. Now, is that going to be a rate increase, do you think, that will be for residents, commercial, industrial, all those things? Or?
Well, one of the major facets of a rate study is to apportion the costs associated with treatment to the appropriate customers. So the rate changes to industrial customers or customers with high-strength loadings or a residential customer with a standard wastewater stream will be different.
Okay.
The adjustment will be somewhat different among them. And so that was one of the goals of this study, was to apportion those costs appropriately.
So will it be a certain percentage, Gary, that is going to be given to everyone, or are we still trying to figure that out?
No, it won't be a straight percentage,
okay.
But overall the revenues of the department were projected to well, in 2009 they were projected to increase in the 7 to 8% per year, and now it's going to be about 9% per year.
Or so. Well, that's like you said, why we do a rate study, is to try and make it even and fair for everybody out there. It sounds
right.
like.
Try to make base the rates on the cost of service that we provide.
Nitrate levels also come into play and have 3, 2, 1. Another element of discussion was the nitrate levels, Gary, at that presentation. Can you explain to our viewers out there why nitrate levels are important in this whole project?
Well, nitrate levels affect the groundwater around this area substantially. Most of that nitrogen has come from fertilizers, and I think many of our viewers will recognize the issues that we have with nitrates. The City Council adopted a policy a number of years ago to maintain the effluent from the city's wastewater treatment plant at a level of nitrate discharge at least close to the drinking water standard. But 2 years ago, the city's wastewater plant really didn't have a problem with nitrates, and part of that was because of the high solids loading. So wastewater treatment is a balance.
Okay.
The high solids loading brought a lot of carbon into the plant. The carbon is a part in the process that actually reduces the nitrate level of the power plant's effluent. So with the reduction in the solids loading and the carbon amount, or the carbon base that would be fed into the overall waste treatment system, the nitrate levels are now a concern. And we've seen that the discharge of nitrate from the wastewater plant has gone up as JBS has cleaned up their discharge that they now send to the city. So the city's wastewater treatment plant now will have to initiate probably a methanol feed, an alcohol feed that is carbon. It's a carbon source that will allow the city's processes to be rebalanced to produce a nitrate effluent that will be near the drinking water standard.
So there's like a lot of elements, it sounds like, in this whole process that has to be considered.
Well, yeah, the wastewater treatment plant's basic purpose is to accelerate natural processes. So the amounts of the flows coming in, the waste, the chemical characteristics of those flows all alter the treatment process. It would be nice if that flow rate never changed, but we have seen major changes now in our effluent and in our input to the plant, so that'll have to be rebalanced.
So after this presentation was completed and the City Council were able to ask questions and stuff, what was the next step that the wastewater treatment plant, I guess, division was charged with in moving the process forward?
Well, the presentation was made at City Council study session, and that program, along with the appropriate rate adjustments, was brought back to the City Council at a subsequent meeting for their acceptance. With the Council's acceptance, then, the department will proceed with the plan as presented to the City Council. Probably one of the early phases of the project will be to solicit proposals for engineering services. And we'd be looking for firms with extensive experience in collection systems and also in wastewater treatment plants, because with the large interceptor lines coming into the front end of the wastewater treatment plant, we know that there are some serious problems with the headworks of that plant also. So an engineering firm with expertise in both would be a good combination to optimize the design.
So it sounds like it's important that we get a good firm in there, because it's somebody we're going to be working with for several years. Is that right?
Yeah, I would anticipate that the engineering firm would be working in a comprehensive plan to address our issues, rather than trying to pick out pieces here and there that we would design individually.
Well, if you are interested in getting more information about the wastewater treatment plan and all the things we talked about today, there's plenty of information on the city's website at grand-island.com, and we'll be continually updating it so that you, our citizens out there, will be able to keep track of what's going on and the next step in the process. Gary, thanks for joining us on that topic, but I have a couple more questions for you before you go. I couldn't let you off the hook that easy.
Okay.
So, now, you've worked here for 36 years. That's a long time.
I have.
Now, does that seem like it's went fast for you, or does it seem longer than 36 years sometimes?
It's gone fast, looking back on it. With city utilities, which was my primary focus over that 36 years, the city's electric and water utilities, there is always more to do than you can really get done. So yeah, it goes fast when you're busy, and we're definitely busy.
So do you have any certain memories or situations that you are going to take with you for sure during that time?
I think generally I feel like the electric and water utilities are both in good shape. That we have very sound municipal utilities with those respects. That our electric reliability and water reliability is very strong. That we are well positioned to the future, that we have the infrastructure in place to sustain the city and sustain its growth. Grand Island's been a dynamic community with a very steady growth. So we're always looking to the future in both of those utilities to ensure we have adequate supply to meet that growth.
So you've probably seen a lot of changes during your time. Has that kind of been challenging for you to make adjustments with different councils, different city administrators, different regulations in your department?
Over the years, city councils and mayors and city administrators, I think, have all been supportive of the utilities. Infrastructure is just absolutely essential to any community, and so with that knowledge, the city councils and mayors and administrators over the years have generally been supportive of trying to improve the system and ensure it's in a position to meet growth to the future.
So what's in store for you, Gary, after you retire here?
My plan is really no plan.
That's the best plan, isn't it?
Exactly.
Just enjoy life and do some fun things. Well, I had one final question for you. Almost every Tuesday night, we get to spend with you at city council meetings and study sessions. What's Tuesday nights going to be like for you?
It depends on what's on TV.
What's on TV? Well, you can always come visit us, Gary.
Always come back to the council meeting.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed having you as a co-worker here, and also always on GITV, and I know I speak for all our city employees when we say you're an inspiration to us, and you've been a great leader in the utilities department.
Thank you.
Good luck and happy days ahead to you, Gary. Thank you. It's been a great City Matters segment today, as we not only learned about some important public works projects that are taking place, but we also welcomed John Collins to the City of Grand Island as the new Public Works Director. And after 36 years, we said a special goodbye and good luck in retirement to Utilities Director Gary Mader. I'm Wendy Meyer-Yerke. Thanks for joining us on Grand Island Television.